I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're three best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is our nerdiest thing.
Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to our nerdiest thing. Today, we're talking about the Netflix show Fall of the House of Usher. Usher. Episode 1, A Midnight Dreary.
Can I tell you something? I didn't watch it for a long time because I thought it was about Usher.
Usher.
I was like, why is Mindy so into the show? And then when you told me it was Mike Flanagan, I was like, oh, he did not do a show on Usher.
No, this is not about that Usher.
Right. Super Bowl Usher.
Oh, man. Well, before we get into what the show is actually about, Deb, will you please share our nerdiest cocktail?
Of course. Tonight's drink is named Midnight Dreary, and it's themed after everyone dying. And I know this drink pairs well with being buried alive, siblings being maybe a bit too close and a little incestuous, it seems, having way too much.
I was like, who? I'm with you now.
It also pairs with having way too much fucking money, and it may cause you to see a weird ass jester in the back of your car,
among other things.
I know, right? So it's really all alcohol, so drink with care. It's vodka, rum, blue. How do you say this, Mindy?
Curacao.
I want to say Curacaco or something.
Caracaco.
And it's got strawberry syrup in it. But here's the thing I will tell you. In the recipe, it says to just put strawberry syrup on top. You want to put the same amount in your drink and mix it up, because if not, it kind of just tastes like rubbing alcohol. So yeah, that's our drink for today.
It is very lovely with the syrup.
Yeah. If you follow our Instagram channel, you will see that there's a picture of us in there with it.
Ooh.
And it is a dreary looking little drink.
It is, yeah. It goes perfectly with that title. Well, now it's time for the nerdy and dirty recap, but we're going to do it a little bit differently with this show. So this show is based on Edgar Allan Poe's writings. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what happened in each episode, and we're also going to talk about what work that episode is based on. So we're not going to try to do that in 30 seconds because that's just crazy. So today it's my turn. I'll share a little bit with you about The Raven and the episode itself. So first, let me tell you about this episode. It's called A Midnight Dreary. And here basically is what happens. Roderick Usher is a super rich pharmaceutical CEO on trial for basically being a bad person. He had a crazy religious mom and a crappy absent illegitimate dad and accidentally buried his mom alive, but she got out and killed his dad, and then she died for real. Roderick has, that was weird. Roderick has 6 kids from 5 different mothers and a crap ton of money. The prosecutor says someone in the Usher family is an informant for the government against this case, and all of Roderick's kids wind up dead. And he's confessing to some really weird stuff to the U.S. attorney and seems like he's losing it. And that's basically episode 1.
Good job, Whit.
There were lots of moments for me.
I have a lot of questions.
Because you guys have seen the show before in its entirety, and I'm watching it for the first time, and I've only watched episode 1.
Which is cool, because I'm excited to see your different point of view.
How it unfolds.
I might be somewhere in the middle, because I watched it a lot longer ago than you did, Dad.
I watched it in November.
And so some of my questions are legit questions. I don't remember what happens.
It is interesting watching it a second time so close to when I watched it last, because I noticed so much.
Sure, I'm definitely, it's going to be a show I want to watch again, probably.
Yeah. All Mike Flanagan is like that.
Yes, I really like him a lot. So this episode called A Midnight Dreary, that is a quote from the beginning of the poem The Raven, which Edgar Allan Poe wrote. I'll tell you a little bit more about the timing of writing that poem in 1847. So The Raven has a poem. Well, it is a poem, and it also has a poem.
A raven out there, I'm sure, has written a poem.
Yeah, right.
They're smart.
It has a narrator. Basically, the narrator is sitting alone on a dark, stormy night, mourning for his lost Lenore, who we assume has died. And he hears somebody tapping at his door. It's the middle of the night, and never sees anybody but a raven. A raven flies in and just kind of sits above his fireplace and says the word nevermore over and over and over again. And over the course of the poem, the narrator basically unravels and kind of goes insane, and ultimately assumes that the raven is a message from God / the beyond ? But a message that he will never forget his lost Lenore and is doomed to be in grief forever. So it's a real bummer. It's a real bummer of a poem and of a story. Right up Edgar Allan Poe's alley. Exactly the kind of thing that he writes all the time. Macabre, creepy, supernatural, kind of spooky, the kind of things that I would teach to my high schoolers at Halloween time every single year. And I loved it.
Say, I think what makes him such an interesting author, though, is that all of his poems are short. And if you can tell an entire story in a short amount of time, it's so much harder to write a short
and a
story.
compelling story.
Right. And like Kate Chopin's Story of an Hour, that's one of my favorite stories of all time. And it's because she does it in one page. And I think that is so cool.
Yeah.
And so you are feeling everything he's feeling in this very short amount of prose, which is cool.
Yeah. And in
I said cool a lot. Cool.
Well, it's okay because I said poem a lot. But I linked in the show notes, I used to play a YouTube clip. It's just audio of Basil Rathbone. He reads The Raven and he does a really good job because, you know, he's a professional.
Would you say...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, would you say that Edgar Allan Poe was the original emo?
Oh, 100%. For sure.
Have you ever seen that shirt that says, I'm just a Poe boy from a Poe family?
Yes, my sister, it's one of those shirts that she's like, I almost bought that for you. And then decided not to. Well, let me tell you, before we get into talking about the episode, let me tell you a little bit about Edgar Allan Poe, old Eddie. I didn't know what to call him. I didn't want to call him Poe.
Eddie.
I didn't want to call him Edgar. So sometimes I call him Edgar and sometimes I call him Eddie in my notes. So I'm just going to give you like kind of a quick, but not really because his life was sort of messed up, biography of him, because we're going to be talking about him and his works over and over again in the course of these 8 episodes. So Edgar Allan Poe is an American writer and poet. He's very well known, at least in America, for his creepy works. He was born in 1809 in Boston to actors David and Eliza was his actual mom's name.
Okay.
His dad left the family when Edgar was a baby. He was around 1 year old, and his mom ended up dying just a year after that. Edgar was taken in, not formally adopted, but taken in by Francis and John Allen of Virginia, and they raised him. He went to college for a little bit, but had to drop out because he couldn't pay for school. And apparently he had a habit of gambling and racking up a lot of gambling debt. That caused a lot of conflict with his father figure, John Allen. They argued about this quite a bit and pretty often, and ultimately they ended their relationship and parted ways after John's wife, Frances, passed away, and Edgar failed out of the officer academy at West Point. So it was like, I'm done with you. I think Franny was the glue keeping them together, right? So they didn't talk at all, I don't think, from that point. So when he failed out of the officer academy and parted ways with this father figure in his life, Edgar decided he wanted to become a full-time writer. He had published a collection of writings anonymously while he was in the military a few years earlier, and it didn't do great, but it wasn't horrible. So he was like, yes, I should do this for a full-time job. Oh, Eddie. So over the next several years, he worked for a lot of publishers, tried to find jobs, moved around to all the major cities at that time, Boston, Baltimore, and New York. And he really struggled to find jobs and to get his works published and to have his works be like accepted and enjoyed, right?
Well, I'm sure people thought they were weird as fuck, right?
100%. Yes, 100%. So he was constantly struggling to make money, to make ends meet, and to figure out how he was going to survive as a writer. And he was really living out that starving artist stereotype. Like, there's a reason that stereotype exists, right? And this is an example of that. So at this point in his life, it gets really weird and really gross. So here we go. This is what he's probably best known for and what my students were always like, dude, what? So in 1836, when he was 27 years old, Eddie married his 13-year-old cousin, Virginia Clem.
Yeah, you don't do that. Don't do it.
So he had been in an age-appropriate relationship back while he was in school with a lady. And it was unclear in my research how serious they actually were. Some places said that they were engaged and she broke it off. Some places said he wanted to get engaged, but they never actually did.
How old was he at this time that he's dating the 13-year-old?
He married her when he was 27.
Okay. It always makes me wonder, why can't you get anyone your own age?
Exactly.
That's not in your family.
Also,
Right?
Also, my 13-year-old who farts in my lap and sings Skibbity Toilet all day. I mean, what in the world did they have in common?
Nothing.
Also, she's a child. Please don't.
Yes. There's a lot happening in that situation, right?
Well, then they were like, dude, I'm not reading your books. You're married to a 13-year-old, you fucking weirdo.
Well,
it was more common then.
Well, hold that thought.
Okay.
So he had this kind of like high school childhood sweetheart, right? And they were serious-ish, but she ended up leaving him and marrying somebody else. And that was the same time that he got kicked out of the officer school and started moving around and trying to become a full-time writer. So he had just lost his most recent job for being drunk on the clock, and then went and married the 13-year-old cousin. After he marries the 13-year-old cousin, he shows up as a married man living with his wife and mother-in-law, goes back to that boss who had fired him and begged for his job back. So nobody said this in my research, but that timing is very suspicious. So I'm wondering if he thought, oh, let me just marry the first person that I see.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that'll give me a better reputation, ? Because they lied about her age. That's another thing too.
Okay.
So he knew that was not okay, right? They had a witness lie and say that she was 21.
I tell my kids all the time, if you have to lie about it, that means you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Right. So he wasn't going around like, I married my 13-year-old cousin, hire me back. So people thought, I'm assuming they lied to everybody and not just at the marriage ceremony, because the paperwork would have said she was 21. So she was also 13, and I don't know many 13-year-olds that could pass for 21-year-olds. But, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Again, my 13-year-old looks real 13.
Right? That's, you know, there's
I will
a lot.
say, though, my 17-year-old daughter all the time gets asked if she wants a cocktail at the restaurant. So.
Yeah, like, I don't know. There's a lot going on with that situation, and it's gross and it's weird. I don't know if he actually married her to help his job prospects. It kind of looks like maybe that was motivation. Unclear.
I always want to
weird.
be very body positive and like, we're not going to yuck anyone's yum, but we're not saying that here.
No, this isn't.
Don't do that.
This isn't yucking a yum. This is like illegal
abuse.
child abuse, disgusting, incestuous.
Right.
Like, yeah,
don't do it.
It's not okay.
Yeah, get help. So Edgar spent the next several years pretty much the same way before he got married, writing, trying to sell his writing, trying to get good jobs, trying to keep those jobs, and generally like floundering and struggling financially. And so a few years later, in 1842, Virginia would have been 19 years old at this point. She started to show signs of tuberculosis. According to Edgar Allan Poe's, I guess, writing about it later, she was playing the piano and singing a song, and he described it as like a blood vessel in her throat bursting, ? So I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I don't think that's actually what happened. I think she probably had a cough fit.
Is this Lenore?
People assume that is who Lenore is about, but it could also be about his mom. He wrote a lot about women dying because his mom died, his adopted mom died, and then his wife died. Right. So
that's not suspicious.
Right.
I never thought about that.
Yeah. So she started showing signs of tuberculosis, 19 years old. She never quite recovered from this. And he is said to have suffered from so much stress from her suffering from her illness that he was drinking heavily to cope, which we know he already had an issue with because he was getting fired from jobs for being drunk. So I don't know how his teenage bride was feeling about having tuberculosis. I only saw things about his stress level, which really made me upset because I was like, she's actually the one who was married at 13. Well, how did she feel about that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, she was the one who was actually sick. How did she feel about that? But nobody cares apparently about what Virginia Clem Poe thought. They only care about him.
For that matter.
I know, right? I saw a mention like she had a mom that lived with them, and that was like the only thing I saw about her mom at all. So anyway, I'm sure there's more research out there that maybe answers those questions, but it just bothered me. Topple the patriarchy. Okay, so maybe there's no record of her as her own person with her own agency and not just as attached to her creeper cousin husband man. That's what I wrote in my notes.
This just occurred to me, though. Do you think she was a biological cousin or
I don't know,
an adoptive cousin? Because that makes it less. No, it doesn't make it less creepy. Never mind.
In 1845, which was before Virginia died, but 3 years after she got sick, that's when Poe released The Raven. I think I said the wrong year when I was talking about it earlier. It was 1845. The Raven was actually a pretty instantaneous success and made him fairly well known, but he made like no money for it. He sold it to the paper, and that was all the money that he got. So the paper was making money printing it and having people buy it, but he wasn't getting like residuals from it. But it made him a little bit more well known, which theoretically is helpful for your career. So just a couple years after that, in 1847, Virginia died from tuberculosis, and Edgar really went off the deep end because he wasn't there yet. So he only lived for 2 more years after she died, but he was very unstable and very erratic in his behavior. He tried to have a serious relationship with another poet, Sarah Helen Whitman, but that didn't work out because he was too unstable. There were rumors that her mother stepped in and was like, hell no, he cray. And so that didn't work out. Then he went back to Virginia, the state of Virginia, and found that childhood sweetheart that had married somebody else, and they started a relationship together at the end of his life. I don't know if she was still married, if she was a widow. That was unclear to me. So then that brings us to the last year of his life. In 1849, he was found in the street in Baltimore, only partly conscious, wearing someone else's clothes, clearly in distress and in need of medical attention. He was taken to the hospital, where he died a few days later. And at the time, the newspapers reporting on it used euphemisms for alcoholism as his cause of death, calling it cerebral inflammation or congestion of the brain, which was the polite way of saying alcohol. However, all the medical records have been lost and or destroyed, and his death has been a mystery for almost 200 years that a lot of literary scholars are always trying to figure out what he actually died from. So over the years, there have been a lot of theories on the cause of his death, including but not limited to rabies, cholera, heart disease, syphilis, epilepsy, carbon monoxide poisoning, and even cooping, which was committing electoral fraud by forcing people to vote for a particular candidate and often turned violent.
So like someone offed him for cooping?
Or that he was being coerced to vote for a particular person and was trying to refuse, and they like beat him to death, basically.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
the syphilis can cause madness, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say that one's the most
likely in my opinion as well. So to finish this out, this is one of the best examples of being petty that I've ever seen, and I did not know this even as an English teacher that taught Edgar Allan Poe. So Edgar's literary rival was a writer named Rufus Wilmot Griswold, which is the best name in the world. He wrote an obituary for Edgar Allan Poe under a fake name, where he called Edgar a lunatic who, quote, walked the streets in madness or melancholy, with lips moving in indistinct curses or with eyes upturned in passionate prayers, never for himself, for he felt or professed to feel that he was already damned. And the obituary opened up with, Edgar Allan Poe is dead. He died in Baltimore the day before yesterday. This announcement will startle many, but few will be grieved.
Oh.
Like, oh, dang.
Damn.
So somehow this rival Griswold became the executor of his literary works, his literary estate, and basically used the rest of his life to try to destroy Edgar Allan Poe's reputation. And wrote biographical articles. He wrote one called Memoir of the Author about Edgar Allan Poe, which he included in an 1850 volume of Poe's collected works, where he depicted Poe as a depraved, drunken, drug-addled madman, and included some of Poe's, quote, letters as evidence, but many/most of his claims were either outright lies or obvious distortion. And the letters that he provided as evidence were faked.
This guy, like...
Isn't that crazy?
He's just not that into you.
I mean, dude is dead, man. Like,
I think I know where this started, and I'll get into it a little later in the podcast.
Yeah. Well, so that's pretty much it.
She's had 2 sips of a cocktail, you all.
Oh, my gosh.
She hasn't drank in like a month, so...
Edgar Allan Poe wrote creepy, macabre, and supernatural short stories and poems that are still read and studied to this day, almost 200 years after he passed away, 200 years after he wrote them. And so these are the works that we're going to talk about. This is the man, the myth, the legend that we will be discussing in all of these different
legend.
All these different episodes. And there are already in the first episode, there were a lot of tie-ins to his actual life, not just his works. So I'm excited to get into the show and what a weirdo creepy husband cousin man that he is. So, Mindy, will you please share our nerdiest vocabulary?
I would love to. So for this one, the names of these characters in The Fall of the House of Usher are all taken from some point in Poe's life or his works.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to focus on in this series for vocabulary, is basically just names. And there's just some really cool tie-ins. There's some really cool ways that they bring things in. So to start with, and you already talked a little bit about Eliza. So Eliza Usher, the mom,
Eliza
is probably named either after Poe's wife, or who was Virginia Eliza Clem Poe, or his mother was also named Elizabeth Arnold. So I think that's probably maybe both. But the really interesting thing about Eliza, the name Eliza, and this character is that Eliza, in some tomes, means pledged to God, which she was cray about God. Like seriously,
she a little bit zealous.
That is the word I was trying to think of.
Say the least.
Zealous, fanatic.
Overzealous. Mm-hmm, yeah. So I think that fits pretty well. And then this is just a little tidbit. So Verna, the name of, in the end, the bartender, whatever, who we still don't know exactly who or what she is. Yeah. But Verna, the name Verna, it doesn't come up with anything like cool as far as meanings, but it is an anagram for raven.
Oh,
interesting. Way to
nice.
go, Mindy.
Which, and we all know
well
too,
done.
that a raven symbolizes like a bad omen.
Right.
So there's going to be a lot of tie-ins to that. So I thought that was a cool one.
That is cool.
And then finally, I'm going to talk about, fair warning. This guy's name is French.
Okay.
And you know me in French. Like, I can't pronounce franglaise. I have to do it like in a French accent because that's how I learned it.
Oui, oui.
And you all always make fun of me. So I'm just going to warn you, like, go ahead and laugh.
We hate it because we ain't it.
I'm laughing already. Let's go.
So we're going to start with the detective, right?
Oh, okay.
So his name is C. Auguste Dupin.
What is it? Dupin.
Dupin. So
sounds sexy, honestly.
Making me horny.
So his name does come from one of Poe's stories. It comes from the Murders at the Rue Morgue, as well as a couple other Poe stories. But he's not actually a detective in these stories. He is a, quote, man of leisure who likes to help the police solve murders just for funsies.
So they
As
would
you
call
do.
that like a psychic?
Maybe. I don't know. I guess he just had a really good like sense of decoding things. And
Today they would call that a suspect for inserting themselves into the investigation.
No kidding.
Oh,
But this character is actually considered the original model for a detective in literature, which I thought was very interesting. So the name Auguste comes from the Latin roots, and it means great or magnificent.
Oh.
So this character may have a big, cool role, but he may not. Who knows? We'll see. But
No spoilers.
He's only in the first episode, so, you know.
No, but what I really find most intriguing about this name is the last name. So Dupin, which if you were to say it in franglais, could be Dupin.
Dupin? That's what I would say.
Which could imply
When you say franglais,
August Dupin.
So it could imply duping someone or being duped. So he's either trying to dupe somebody or he's the like stool pigeon that's like gonna get duped.
Oh, we don't know.
I don't know. But
We'll
anyway,
find out.
I thought that was a cool etymology thing to go with his name.
So now that brings us to the actual episode. Now it's time to talk
It was
about
all part of the episode.
Well,
this
yeah.
is called our nerdiest thing, for the record.
So let's talk about, from this first episode of the show, your favorite moment or twist.
I'm just going to go because I'm fairly certain I said this when we covered the show Midnight Mass a couple of years ago. But when Napoleon Usher, who's played by Rahul Kohli, comes onto the screen, my panties fell off again, just like they did in Midnight
love
Mass.
him.
And they made him hotter by giving him tattoos and a sweet apartment.
Yeah.
He's just so pretty.
And his
He
actual
is.
accent.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Yes.
So much so that I was like, what's Mike Flanagan making next? And Mike Flanagan's actually working on an Exorcist movie, and nothing that seems like these types of shows are in his like IMDb right now.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's something. But
I'm sure.
I needed
He's
to know
always-
when we were going to see all these people again.
Yeah,
Because
he's
he does
always
have a
cooking up.
cast he works with.
That's what I was like, ooh, that's so-and-so from Midnight Mass. Ooh, and
Yeah.
every so often Robbie would be like, why is that person so familiar? And I'm like, because that was
You watched The Haunting of Hill House, right?
No.
Well, the woman that plays Verna is a huge role in that.
Yeah, I knew she was in that.
You need to watch that. Not at night. Don't watch it at night.
He didn't recognize Bev from Midnight Mass.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, she looks exactly the same.
Yeah. And talks exactly
Yeah,
the
like,
same.
how do
Except
you
for
not
her
recognize?
hair's a little bit more shiny.
Yeah, he was like, wow, she looks like 20 years younger. I was like, well,
She does. Yes.
that's
When you're not
makeup for
being
you.
a bitch, it'll make you look
What was your favorite moment or twist, Mindy?
Mine is actually really early on in the episode. It's when Roderick is telling Dupin that his long dead mother is right behind him. And the whole time I'm sitting there trying to like figure out in the shadows. I'm trying to discern if she's actually there, like if he's just messing with him. And then the guy never turns around, but then you see movement behind him, like she's walking away. It was so creepy in the very best way.
Yeah, I loved that. Robbie didn't even see it. I had to rewind it because I was like,
I was looking the whole time.
I was
like,
too.
There's somebody back there, isn't there? But I can't see him.
But he was looking at the wrong part of the screen, so he didn't see it. And then when I reacted, he was like, "Where was she?" So we had to rewind it. He was really enjoying this first episode. That is kind of my same favorite moment. I didn't pick one in particular, but just the subtle creepiness in general. So that's an example of that, where Robbie didn't even notice that had happened at first. But also the basement door being open and him saying like, "Madeline's downstairs," and I'm like, "Oh, because you killed her, right?" Like her dead body's downstairs. Is that what you
there,
mean?
yeah.
A dead body wouldn't be making all that noise.
I didn't hear any noises.
Oh, he said like what I hear her down there.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I guess I said no. That's too scary. And then Roderick seeing visions and like people that nobody else is seeing, and like the jester in the car, the Black Death mask lady in the back of the church. Like it was all these. They were kind of jump scares, but not really jump scares.
Yeah.
They was just creepy in general. I really enjoyed that a lot.
Which is definitely a Poe vibe.
Oh yeah,
And
for sure.
a Mike Flanagan vibe.
Yes.
Yes, yes. I thought it was really great. What about least favorite moment or least favorite twist?
Well, speaking of the jester at the end of the episode, that scared the crap out of me.
That scared me too.
Like, why is it suddenly there? It apparently scares the shit out of Roderick too. I mean, he like essentially passes out. But one thing I find interesting about the jester, and I want to talk more about the symbolism of his show in like a bit, but the jester itself can symbolize the unveiling of hidden realities, challenging conventions, and provoking introspection, which just so happens to be what this show is all about.
Yes.
Mike Flanagan, the showrunner, he's just a freaking genius. And
Absolutely.
we know from covering Midnight Mass that he does nothing on accident.
Yes, that's true. Everything.
So I like all the symbolism. And I mean, I think it's pretty, even though you've not seen all of this, Whitney, I think it's pretty obvious that that's what the show is about, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Whit?
Well, my least favorite moment was the mom coming out of the coffin. I hated that. It was super creepy, but also at this point, it was just like weird. And if it's from one of Edgar Allan Poe's stories, I don't remember what it is. And I'm sure that there will be more to come from that. Cause like you say, he doesn't do anything on accident, but it was just like a weird, unnecessary detail to me in this first episode of like, why do we need the mom to be buried alive? Why do we need the mom to bust out of the coffin to choke her kid and then march down the street and kill the guy that clearly she had an affair with? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I just thought it was kind of strange. Like, why not
Because
just...
it made it creepier.
But why not just like, why couldn't she just rally and get up out of bed and silently march down the street? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I'm withholding judgment kind of because I'm like, well, this is only the first episode. So let's wait and see like what's going on with that. But I just was kind of like, that was weird. Yeah. Was it just being scary for scary's sake? Maybe. I don't know. So that was my least favorite moment.
Mine was a little different. Mine was the awkwardness at the dinner with the cake. Ooh, it was so cringe.
Oh, it's
I had
okay.
secondhand
Would you like
embarrassment
some
for her.
coffee with that cake? I was like, oh my
was
gosh.
so cringy. I could not even. I've had so much. Ugh.
I really enjoyed that. That made me laugh.
Bad because I feel like she's like the only normal person except for Lenore, and she's like, "But I made you this cake that looks like a law book because you're all fucked."
Like,
Yeah.
I love that she did that, but the whole like bad acting, like that people didn't really know. I don't know. It was just very awkward. The whole moment was like, it's one of those times when I felt like if I was in there, I'd be like, trying to hide under the table.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'd be so embarrassed
Well,
for her.
I really liked when she was working on it earlier in the episode. She was like, you know how your father loves this. I mean, he's in these kinds of moods. And I was like, does he? I think you want him
they said
to.
cool one time.
Right. Yes. It's like when you're, you lie to somebody that you're dating, like, yeah, I loved the cabbage you made for dinner. And then, 25 years later, you're like,
still eating the fucking
yes.
cabbage.
You're like, I
Does
don't
Robbie
like
make
this.
you eat cabbage?
No, but my father-in-law did. He lied about cabbage when he was dating my mother-in-law. And so his mother-in-law would make it for him like all the time.
That's hilarious.
Oh, that's funny.
He never told her that he didn't want to
Cabbage
eat
steaks, cabbage stew,
Oh my god.
sauerkraut.
Well, that brings us to biggest revelation, which I'll go first because mine is like not exactly, not necessarily a plot point, but I had no idea that Mark Hamill was in the show. And when he showed up, I was like, Luke Skywalker, and I got really excited.
I'd forgotten about that
Yeah,
too.
I had no idea. I don't know anything about this show other than Mike Flanagan, and like I knew the pharmaceutical thing, and that was it. And so I'm going in like super blind. I really love the insinuation that from the first episode that Roderick had all of his kids killed, maybe because like one of them maybe is an informant, and he does. I envision it going one of two ways. This is a prediction. Not really a revelation. I think that either I'm not going to look at you guys because I don't want to see any reactions to what I'm about to say.
We're not going to react. We're good at
I
keeping
think
secrets.
that either the U.S. attorney just straight up lied and that there is no informant at all, or I think the granddaughter is the informant, or I think that Roderick had all the kids killed because he didn't know which one it was and it was like, well, let me just get rid of all the options.
I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I don't remember.
It's like me reading Crescent City. Like, I know I did
not
this,
know.
but I don't know what happens.
but I don't remember any of it.
But I did enjoy figuring out like, okay, here's the framework of the show.
Yeah.
Besides just like, it's a creepy show by a creepy dude, But that was it. Mark Hamill. Woo.
Similarly, one of my biggest revelations was that the guy that plays Dupin is the same actor that played Dixon in Alias.
That took me almost the whole episode. The whole time I'm like, who is that guy? And I finally looked up his IMDb and I was like, oh yeah.
What's the movie from the 80s where is it Invisible Man where like the gauze is wrapped around his face? That's also that actor.
What? I did not
That's
know
what
that.
he got famous for.
Oh,
Or
okay.
show. I think it was a show, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, that was his.
Dang.
I just know him from Alias.
Marcus Dixon, the best secondary character ever.
Oh,
That
absolutely.
guy actor.
Love him. But that's like just one of my little side ones. But my biggest revelation, which isn't actually the biggest, but to me, the best reveal in the whole show was that Napoleon was getting a blowy while playing games and being on the phone with his significant other. Like all the
significant other.
Yeah.
I know. I was like, what?
Yeah, I was like, I need questions answered about this
It
relationship.
must have not been a very good blowy because he was playing a video game and breathing normally and talking on the phone.
Well, and immediately like didn't have to fidget with himself when he stood up or
Right,
anything.
yeah, it was like he didn't have an erection.
That's what I'm. Yeah, I mean, maybe he didn't.
That was weird, but
It was weird.
I definitely laughed out
all
loud.
I have to say is if it had been me,
Yeah, he was like, go out there.
You gotta
She
go.
just like hung out on the balcony.
and
That
she's
made me
taking
laugh.
like pictures of him through
through the window. Yeah, that did make me laugh a lot. But what about you, Deb?
I know that you talked about already how you didn't like the mom pulling herself out of the grave, but I have to say that was really terrifying for me and got me wondering how that could possibly happen. I understand that her children, I mean, they seemed very sheltered, right? And I don't think any child would know how to check a body to see if it's truly dead. But there are plenty of instances of medical professionals declaring a person deceased who actually isn't.
Ooh.
And unfortunately, being buried alive can and has happened. So let's talk about it a little bit.
I rebuke that.
According to HistoryHit.com, here are 4 stories of people being buried alive, which happened way more often before modern technology was able to declare a person dead, right? Before stethoscopes and machines and all of that. So what happens nowadays, though, is that someone just wakes up in the morgue. So I'll go into that in a few minutes.
Can you imagine? They're traumatized for the rest of their life.
For sure.
This deep dive traumatized me. Okay. In 1661, a man by the name of Lawrence Cawthorn died and was buried by his landlady, who it turns out wanted his belongings, so she didn't get a consultation from the doctor. She just buried him. People who visited his grave could hear him screaming under the ground. And by the time they got to him, he had actually passed away.
Oh, no.
There was trauma to his head from where he had tried to break through the coffin.
Oh, my gosh.
So can you imagine the terror? Like, this deep dive, like, unlocked a new fear in me.
For real?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. That's...
Yeah.
Oh my
In
God.
1817, the mayor of Bath, which is near Bristol in the United Kingdom, died from a fever and was buried very quickly. As the gravekeeper was sealing up the grave, he began to hear moans coming from the casket.
Oh my gosh.
Once again, they were too late. They opened his coffin, and it messed up his sister so much that she has to be beheaded when she died, so the same couldn't happen to her. Can you imagine being
I
like,
don't
that is
blame
my
her.
worst fear, please behead me.
Yep. So
I
please
don't
make
die.
sure I'm absolutely 100%
You know, this
dead.
is like, I think we talked about this during Midnight Mass too. This is where the whole lore of vampirism came from too. They think a lot of those people actually weren't dead.
Right.
They had just accidentally
Right.
buried alive.
Yeah.
And they had started putting bells inside the coffins so people could ring them. But what we're finding is they'll suffocate or hurt themselves to the point where they can't survive anyway. So,
Isn't that where the term graveyard shift came from?
I don't
Like
know.
to listen for bells being rung?
oh dear God. Can you imagine being like a gravekeeper and it being like, ding, ding,
And
ding,
hearing the
and
bell,
you're like,
yes.
I think an angel just got its wings.
I don't think I made that up, but maybe I did.
We'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
So this next one hits a bit close to home because it happened in 1891 in Pikeville, Kentucky, which is a few hours from us. A woman called Octavia Smith unfortunately lost her infant son and became so depressed that she fell into a coma. After passing away from unknown causes, she was quickly buried because it was the middle of the summer and embalming at that time was not an option. So they just had to bury her, right? Oddly enough, though, other people in the town started to fall into a similar coma, but then eventually, they woke up.
Oh, no.
Okay. So to her husband's horror, he dug her up and saw apparent signs of struggle within the coffin, including the lining being sliced by her fingernails and the glass top was completely shattered on top of her.
Oh, gosh.
And apparently the husband then had a lifetime phobia of being buried alive.
Well,
I mean, for real.
Right? And finally, we have the story of Angelo Hayes, who was in a horrible motorcycle accident in 1937. So this wasn't that long
Not that long ago.
He was left so disfigured that the family didn't even get to see his body. Oddly enough, the life insurance company was suspicious about something and asked for his body to be exhumed 2 days later. When they opened the casket, his body was still warm. Angelo, what they think is he was in a deep coma that didn't require like a lot of oxygen, like his body was running on very little resources. This guy survived.
Oh, wow.
He became a public figure and even invented a coffin with an oven, fridge, and tape player inside of it.
Oh, my
in case.
gosh.
Just in case.
Okay, so while we may not hear stories of folks being buried alive anymore, like I said earlier, what we do see are accounts of modern day people waking up in the morgue.
Oh, my gosh.
And when I say modern, I mean in the last 5 years.
No,
And
no.
this isn't happening in underdeveloped countries, guys. I have accounts linked in the show notes of instances all over the world, including the United States. So this isn't like they don't have technology,
Right.
or the doctor maybe wasn't there. And so these are medical professionals telling their family that these people are dead. Okay. So I'll let you go down that terrifying rabbit hole all on your own. It's linked in the show notes. But I did want to point out there's several theories as to why someone may be declared dead, but actually still among the living. And the most common is called catalepsy, which is a nervous disorder that replicates rigor mortis. It decreases the body's response to stimuli and it slows down your breathing. So I'm just going to ask you too, because I'm sure if I die before my husband, you're going to like be there and probably helping him with stuff. If you can just wait a few days before you bury me, I might be having like a neurological episode.
give her a minute.
I could be in a coma.
Hold on.
I don't want to wake up in a morgue, and you can take me there when I start stinking. Don't move my body until I stink. I'm begging you. Like
Yeah.
these.
That's just crazy.
I mean, and here's the thing. If their body's getting stiff, they're not breathing, they're not getting any kind of activity on these machines, why would they not?
Right.
think they're dead.
Right.
So it does make me wonder these morgue stories, because there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
If people are still getting buried alive, like, it's terrifying if you think about it.
But it's fascinating to me. So I actually just read a book called Morgue to Love by Megan Montgomery. And it was, first of all, it was hilarious.
Sounds cute.
It is.
No, this isn't the one that you told me there was a lot of squirting in it.
That's the same author. Same author.
Because I was like, I don't think I can read it.
She talks a lot about one of the mainly female characters. She is a medical examiner, and so I just found it fascinating, all the things that they have to do, like, to bodies, and, like, depending on what state of rigor mortis they're in or how long they've been dead or whatever. She does research, so I'm assuming it's true,
Legit. Yeah.
Sometimes after they're dead for a while and all the gases and everything, like, build up.
Oh, they, like, moan and stuff.
Yes, you move them
Yeah.
and they actually, like,
They'll
make
twitch
sound, and like, other people, like, people that are, like, sitting Shiva or something where they're sitting next to the body and they do that, like, in this instance, she was going to pick up the body and she moved it, and then the mom was like, he's not dead, and then they get, like, really, upset about it, and she's like, but he is.
I read an article on Ranker, and it was like morticians telling their scariest stories, and it was about a guy, because when that air and everything comes out, it makes their body move. And a guy was telling a story where he got super upset one night because the body actually, like, sat up. And he said he ran out of there and didn't go back until the next day.
Oh, there's no way.
that would
He
freak
said
me out.
once he wasn't scared, he knew what happened, right? Like, it was the body releasing gas and, like, the and so, but he's like, I was so fucking terrified. I had to leave.
100%. I wouldn't go back.
I wouldn't go back either.
If I was a mortician, I would never be okay with being there by myself.
No, that's
no.
what I was just thinking. I would not go back
Like,
without
it's fascinating to me, but I don't want to do
If
it.
you're a mortician, will you please message us and tell us?
I'm, like,
Message
super intrigued.
You can
Email
message
us
Deborah.
at ournerdiestthing@gmail.com. I do check
funny.
that email, and then I'll tell Whitney all about it.
Yeah. Well, that was horrifying.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Deborah.
I really loved it. I thought it was cool, but it also scared the fuck out
It
of me.
is like it's
Yeah.
super interesting, but also horrifying.
Yeah.
In present day, how they don't catch that these bodies are still alive.
No. No. Well, let's move on.
Your voice sounds really good.
Oh, thank you. It's the sexy phlegm. Let's
Smelly cat.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about our favorite tie-in to the original story. So for this episode, there I think is more than one original story technically with different character names and stuff, but the overall episode is based on the Raven poem. So I'll go first. I just liked how the Raven showed up a couple of times.
Yeah.
I knew that the 1980 New Year's thing was going to be important because it's literally the very first thing that you see on screen when the episode starts as like a weird flashback thing. And then again outside the church after he sees the weird like jester that scared the crap out of everybody and then passes out, ? Has a nosebleed. That was weird.
You'll find out more later.
I'm sure I will. Yeah. I really enjoyed that Raven as like a visual symbol of just like it is in the poem, and also the granddaughter being named Lenore.
Yeah.
But that is what makes me think that she is the informant, because Lenore is not like a positive thing. It's not.
Right.
It's not good if you are Lenore, right?
Right.
So anyway, that's my
Well,
theory.
it makes me think that she's gonna die.
Well, that too. Although she hasn't so far.
Right.
I know we're going into flashbacks, so I know she's okay for at least a little bit, you know. But what about you guys? Favorite tie-in?
Tying into the whole I loved seeing all the ravens, but also the woman that he sees at the back of the funeral. It almost looks like she's got a raven mask on or something.
Does.
And then again, going back to ravens being a sign that they're bad omens.
Yeah.
I just thought that was a really unique way to sort of bring all that imagery together.
Can I say, though, that some cultures see ravens as bringers of life? And that...
it definitely goes both
because
ways.
I have this whole raven I want to get tattooed on my forearm, but I didn't want to have like an omen of death on me. So I was looking up other cultures and what they thought that ravens bring. And a lot of... Some people think that they are from the afterlife, but it's like a loved one watching over you.
Not a scary thing.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
The other thing that I loved this tie-in, and I didn't realize how much I would love this tie-in until I started looking at it, is the character of William Longfellow, who is the illegitimate father of Roderick and Madeline, and who Eliza worked for. And he's a complete douche, right? So I thought there's got to be something there, right? Like, what is the deal with the name Longfellow and how does that tie in? Well, going back to poets, apparently Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, another poet, Edgar Allan Poe had a huge beef with him. And so this is not an accident.
He seemed to have a beef with
I was going to say, yeah.
No, he had this really weird feud with Longfellow that I'm going to attempt to break down for you. It's very strange. And it just goes to show you like how crazy he really was.
Erratic, yeah.
Yeah. So it started with Poe, who was an editor at this point at Graham's Magazine in 1841.
It's my favorite magazine.
Yeah. And so he wrote a very complimentary letter to Longfellow asking if he would contribute to the magazine because Longfellow was very well known and he was beloved and Poe was trying to make himself look good in front of his boss, right?
Sure.
So he also kind of wanted to establish himself as a tastemaker, which was the 1800s version of a TikTok influencer.
Yeah.
So Longfellow wrote back and basically was like, you know, that's lovely what you said about me, but I'm too busy to help out. Like, he wasn't rude, but Poe took offense because
But it was a rejection.
emo guys do.
I invited you.
So from this point, Poe decided to make a name for himself as more of a rebel, right?
Oh, gosh.
So during this time, there were several poets who were acclaimed in Boston, and it became this sort of high society cultural thing to like follow these poets, and they were like the big names. And Longfellow was kind of their poster child. So Edgar Allan Poe, sadly, was kind of a black sheep. So he attacked this whole idea of this Boston cultural establishment, mostly making Longfellow as his scapegoat. So like he really just hated this. And like he wrote about how awful Boston was. And so I don't know why he thought he was going to make a name for himself that way, but whatever. So he then started publishing negative reviews of Longfellow's
Oh my gosh.
works
Desperate.
in these magazines, right?
Sounds like asshole book talkers,
Like it's
doesn't
it?
super petty and major small dick energy here, right?
For
like,
real.
Like this guy, just there's something going on. He really.
Number one, you married your 13-year-old cousin.
Number two, you have a small dick.
Number two, yeah.
And you have this weird feud thing going. So the first ones weren't too scathing, just basically that he didn't think Longfellow was any good at poetry and that he wrote such brilliant poems, quote, by accident. So he was like, it's just, you just got lucky, basically.
Okay.
You just threw some words down and you got
That's
lucky,
offensive to all authors.
I know. So then, though, he decided to ramp up his criticism in what he deemed, and this is like self-proclaimed, the Little Longfellow War.
Oh my God.
So now he's working for the Daily Mirror because, as you said, he went from job to job.
Yeah.
And this is where it starts to actually get crazy. He accuses Longfellow of plagiarism in his poem, The Waif. He says that the poem copied ideas, meters, and rhythms of other poets. And, okay, now Longfellow wasn't having any of Edgar Allan Poe's shit. He was like, he just ignored it. He was like, he never even commented. He was like,
Yeah.
I'm done with this. This
Not
is
even gonna
stupid. This is not
dignify.
a war or whatever. But some of Longfellow's friends wrote in defending their bro's work. And I think this Griswold guy was one of them.
Maybe, yeah.
And this is where I think like that all came in. Like he was like petty by association. Since
Yeah.
Longfellow wasn't going to do it, he was going to do it for him. But there were others.
A real ride or die.
Yeah. So Edgar, who is now working for a different magazine, the Broadway
course.
Journal, he's quite the job hopper, wastes 6 whole weeks of editorials and back and forth discourse with these friends of Longfellow's. And even though he never said Longfellow had like plagiarized him specifically, he generally considered himself a neglected man of genius.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Edgar Allan
This is
Poe
where the
was? Oh, poor
this is where the
neglected
small
man.
dick energy comes in. And he also thought he was intellectually superior to his adversary, who he said was, quote, a wealthy and triumphant gentleman of elegant leisure, which sounds to me like he was calling him a lazy ass.
Yeah, like you're just a wealthy guy
Right.
who doesn't
Got
have to
lucky
work.
You got
or-
nothing
yeah.
and
You're a nepo baby.
You have
Yes.
time to sit down and write down stuff that doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
'Cause
I
you don't-
write because I'm tortured and I can't sleep at night.
Yeah.
So because Longfellow never personally responded to Poe's antics, the whole thing kind of died away, or maybe he did it until he died. I don't know.
I kind of
It
love
died
that.
with
But he
Poe.
just like ignored it.
I know. But people today actually still speculate about whether Poe didn't make the whole thing up as a publicity stunt, which again kind of tracks. It sounds kind of exactly what he was, but Poe was kind of a little bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For real.
Poe was a little bitch.
He was. Yeah.
He really was. Like, he really had some issues. Yeah.
Yeah. He needed some tissues for his issues. Well, thank you so much for that, Mindy. He is a character.
Just a little bit more insight into that
the weirdness,
crazy mind of his.
Good grief. Deb, did you share your favorite tie-in?
Not yet. So I'm like you. I obviously loved seeing the Raven everywhere in the episode, but I wanted to take a second to talk about Poe's work that this whole series is named after, Fall of the House of Usher, since we don't have an episode based off that book, because it gives us some foreshadowing into the rest of the show. In this poem, the overarching message is that obtaining a massive amount of wealth is equivalent to making a deal with the devil. Oddly enough, another symbolic point of a jester is not clinging to possessions. Like their whole thing is you're supposed to just live life. You don't cling to things. Themes of Poe's Usher poem include tension between reason and madness, the power of death over life, and the descent into madness, which is mirrored by the deterioration of the house, which I thought was really kind of cool.
Oh,
The
that is
dilapidated
cool.
childhood home. Yeah.
That was so beautiful at one
Right.
time, right? And as Roderick, I keep wanting to say Froderick because it makes kind of petty, but as Roderick continues to descend, that house gets more and more tore up, which I think is a really cool image. Yeah, so Fall of the House of Usher is also a really cool poem, so I would read it even though we didn't assign it to you guys in your book club homework.
Well, let's talk about episode MVP, because mine is Roderick, who I call in my notes not Tom Skerritt, which I stole from Jason Mantzoukas, because on How Did This Get Made, when they watched the Twilight movies, he called Charlie Swan not Tom Skerritt. And I don't know. I can't remember who this guy is other than being in that Ashley Judd movie that one time.
Look like Tom Skerritt.
Yeah. So anyway.
Oh, he's in Double Jeopardy.
Yes.
I love that movie.
He's the husband. Yeah. Double Jeopardy.
She fucks him up.
Yeah. So,
that's a great movie.
Not Tom Skerritt. He was really good at, in this first episode at least, being stoic and also creepy and also ruthless and also tortured. Like, he had a lot going on that he needed to do as an actor, and I thought he did a really good job. So I really, and he is our main character and the narrator of our story. So I thought he did a great job. Well done, not Tom Skerritt.
Well, mine is Freddie. Because who the fuck has a bowling alley in their kitchen? It's in his kitchen.
Yeah.
And he's just like bowling a few rounds while his daughter, who we've already pointed out is named Lenore, she and his wife are just hanging out. And you can tell he lives on the edge of fucking audacity all the time. Like, I bet everyone in this life is like the fucking audacity of that guy. Like, you have to be that person if you have a bowling lane.
Even just, his daughter, which I mean, typical teen too, but it's kind of like, oh my god, Dad! Like, I roll.
Yeah. Who was yours, man?
Mine was the Raven, always showing up as a sign of a bad omen.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah, that's
like it was always there, lurking in the background.
Always watching,
making things creepy.
Yeah. Knocking at someone's door.
Yeah. What about favorite secondary character? Who did you guys pick?
Mine was Augie. Is he a national? What is his position again? I wanted to say district attorney.
He's a U.S. attorney.
U.S. attorney. Yes. Thank you. And like you already said, this actor's name is Carl Lumbly. We know him as Dixon from Alias. But the reason I named him the favorite secondary character is that he's just such a fantastic actor in this episode.
Yeah, he's great.
His stiffness in the fact that he really is too scared to look away from Roderick. Do you notice he never looks away from him? It just adds to the show's like psychological horror.
Yeah.
So not only does he never turn around, if you watch closely, not once does he take his eyes off Roderick's eyes. Because
like, I'm not even looking in the peripheral.
Right. It's fucking terrifying in here. This guy is sitting in this house that could like blow down with the breeze, but he's sitting in the super nice velvet chair and he's drinking $4 million champagne, by the way.
Yeah.
And I just think that Carl Lumbly does like this amazing job of being like, I'm fucking terrified, but I have to get my job done.
And somehow he still feels intimidating.
Yes.
Yeah, he does.
He
does. Yeah.
Who was your secondary character?
Mine was Camille, the PR lady, the PR daughter, because she's just going to be a total bitch and a sassy one. I know I'm going to.
She was really good on Midnight Masque too.
Great.
Yes, she was. So I don't know. That whole vibe of, she wasn't in it that much,
right?
But her
have Cartier make a gold plate.
her her two assistants. I can already tell that's going to be a fun character.
Yeah, I liked her a lot too. Well, I picked Madeline, the weird sister, who I did think was a wife at first, and then I was like, oh no.
I was like, oh no, are you not picking up on the incest vibes when I did our cocktail?
It was very flowers in the attic. Like, they were sleeping in the same bed together.
You're a little
like
too close, guys.
That's that was weird, but I like that character. I don't know. Like, I like her, but I feel she's maybe the ultimate bad guy. Like, I'm not really sure what's going on with her, but she seems definitely the same kind of ruthless as Roderick's character, but she seems to have more of an edge to her compared to him. He seemed to have a little bit of softness of like, I would never turn my back on my kids. And she seems more like the type of person that's like, fuck them kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know if it's an edge, if it's like an evilness to her. I'm not sure, but I thought all three of the different actresses that played the three different ages of Madeline, I thought they all did a really good job showing that same kind of personality.
I'm interested in if they did some sort of CGI overlay on the young boy's face.
Yeah.
Because he looks so much like the
him.
middle-aged
Yeah.
character.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Like, I was like kind of taken aback. I was like, that's either his son or they did some CGI or something.
I don't know.
Or maybe he just had
Sometimes-
his facial expressions down.
Sometimes they find people that look so similar and are not related at all, and it's
That's
amazing.
like the one that played Blake Lively's.
I was just about to say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Like
Girl.
Lively
Yeah.
as a child. On It
Yeah,
With
that
Us.
was a really good cast.
That went on Netflix, and I was like, not watching that again. Not because it's a bad movie, y'all, because it bothered me
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
it is a good movie.
It
but
is a very good movie.
yeah. So, what questions do you guys need resolved right now?
Oh, the
non-spoilery, non-spoilerly or spoiler.
Why don't you go first, Whit, since you
Yeah.
are the one who hasn't watched it all the way?
Well, my main question, I kind of like am holding questions because I kept thinking, well, it's only the first episode. And I'm going to wait a little bit before I am like, but wait, what about this? But my main question was like Longfellow. Okay, so the super religious mom was absolutely having an affair with a married man.
Oh, yeah.
So I need more information. Like I need more information about that because it's weird to me to have the super religious zealot do something that's so clearly against what her religious beliefs are supposed to be. You know what I mean? And
I
also,
hadn't even thought of it that way.
well,
actually.
and also like with a guy that is horrible,
Obviously an asshole.
Yes,
Yeah.
like
But it was her
I
boss
need-
that she worked for 20 years. You
I
have to
need more
wonder if she was,
information.
like,
coerced. Yeah.
right. Like I need to know more about that.
Yeah.
Which I'm assuming. Do we find out more about the mom?
I honestly can't remember.
I can't
Okay.
either.
That's why I'm like, is that it for the mom story or what?
So the rest of the show is so fucking shocking that I can't remember if they bring her back in.
And
or
it goes back and forth. So
That's what I
in
figured.
timeline,
So, what about you guys?
not. Go ahead, man.
Oh, I just had so many questions. My first question was, what was this pressing news that the doctor had to come in and tell Roderick? They just left
mine
that
too.
open-ended, and then he like faints with blood coming out of his nose. So I'm like, obviously he's sick.
That doesn't normally happen to you?
Not normally.
Is
actually.
it not supposed to?
And then this was my progression. Why did he see a weird woman giving him a drink? Who is the weird woman? What the fuck? Who is this bartender? So I need to know a little bit more about Verna, apparently. And then what did Roderick and Madeline do? Like, clearly they
That
did
was one of my
something before they
questions,
came
too.
into this
They're
bar,
so
right?
suspicious.
Oh,
Said I did something bad.
and she's like, we need to make sure people see us.
Right, but not too much. We're not going to be over the top, but people need to see us here.
Well, and
Which makes me think, when you were talking about her being more ruthless, she's definitely the leader.
yes,
between the two.
She gives him the ideas,
Yeah.
and then he does it. But
Yes.
then the attorney said, like, "Oh, people still whisper about what happened that night," and I'm like, "What happened that night?
I know.
Tell me everything."
So I think the only other question we've not talked about, and especially for new watchers of this show, is how Roderick can be responsible for everyone's death. Because
Yeah.
Augie even says, I know how your kids
We
died.
looked into
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Right. We know you're not responsible. So that was my big question when I watched it for the first
Yeah,
time.
like, why is he
right.
saying it's
What's
his
going
fault?
on?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And how is him talking about his mother going to lead to him saying, I killed all my children?
Yeah, because he
Right.
said, "I'm confessing everything to you." Yeah,
Right.
which is like, what?
Where did that go?
Yeah. What about what you guys are looking forward to?
I actually had a couple other tidbits that didn't like fit in anywhere else, but I loved, there's a couple of things. First of all, the priest at the funeral, he's actually reciting a poem called Spirits of the Dead, which was written by Poe himself, which is another
really
tie-in.
Beautiful poem.
Yeah.
It is. It's gorgeous. And the way they interweave it through, that was just very, very brilliant.
Well, it's funny. Normally we do favorite quote, and because we're doing this one differently, we're not, but I didn't notice that in the notes, so I was pausing during that poem, writing shit down. So beautiful. No, it's fine, because I really enjoyed it, but no, next week I have to write down a quote.
Yeah, there you go. And then the other one, and I don't want to give anything too much away, Whit, but the song, the opening song, Another Brick in the Wall, and I think you'll recognize it from reading Poe, but it's definitely going to come into play later, and it's a bit of foreshadowing.
I didn't catch that either.
And I just think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Just genius. So keep that in mind, listeners, if you haven't seen it all.
One thing too, if you're watching the first episode for the first time, through these really quick flashbacks, you see how every single person dies.
Yeah.
If you've seen it before, you catch it. If you've never watched it, you wouldn't know that's what it is.
Right.
But you're like, oh, that's when that happened. That's when that, and like it just happens so quickly that you're like, oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Well, what are we looking forward to moving up forward into the next episode?
So there's obviously a history between August and Roderick, right? So I want to find out more about that. And then watching the show more closely, since I've already seen it once, just looking for all the symbolism that the director is doing, because I know there's going to be a lot of that. And then finally seeing how the deaths of the family mirror the works of Edgar Allan Poe that they're based off of. Yeah. I'm really excited to dig into that over the next 7 weeks.
I'm excited about that too.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig into Poe's works and intersperse them with watching this too, because I didn't actually do that the first time, which is kind of unlike me actually, because normally when it's something like that I'll be like, well, what's that?
Yeah.
But I'm really excited to sort of dive into that, and I'm also curious because Roderick and Madeline own this Fortunato, this pharmaceutical thing, but so did Longfellow. So I'm wondering how in the timeline they get from the dad who doesn't
that happen,
who doesn't even acknowledge his kids being at the top of that, to them getting it. So there's something conspired in there, and I'm curious to see what.
Well, I'm assuming that it's whatever they did on New Year's Eve 1980, because that's the very first frame of the entire show is that New Year's Eve decoration. So I'm like, okay, well, that's the most important thing, right? But that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to, is like what happened that night, because that night and that bartender seems to be like the crux to everything.
Pivotal.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's the key to
and
it
she
all.
even says, like, tonight we're in the midnight business.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's that mean?
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about for this first episode?
Really fun episode.
It's really
I'm very
good.
excited to watch this again.
Yeah, I'm excited to keep going.
Rediscover it.
Yeah. So next week, guys, we're talking about episode 2 of Fall of the House of Usher, which is titled The Masque of the Red Death. So be sure to watch that and to read The Masque of the Red Death. See ya.
Bye. Like what you heard in this episode? Follow Our Nerdiest Thing on Instagram at instagram.com/Our Nerdiest Thing, or Facebook at facebook.com/Our Nerdiest Thing. We love hearing from fellow nerds. Email us at ournerdiestthing@gmail.com.